All right, we are live. Business Acceleration Playbook with Maria Daniels, Ray Baxter, Jeff Dwoskin, Angela Buckley, and our special guest, Ashley. Do you pronounce your last name DeLuca? I was going to ask you before we went live.
Yes.
Gosh, yes.
DeLuca, you got it.
Score. I was hoping, but I called Jeff the wrong last name on purpose, so I've gone with it. It's Dwoskin, but I say Dwoskin. So wow.
Oh,
So
my.
okay, so we are here to let all the entrepreneurs and all the small business owners get some tips and tricks to help them be able to win in their business. So I wanted to have Ashley on. I know Ray, Jeff, Angela, you have not met Ashley yet. So she's great. So you'll love her. And, but she is the expert on email marketing and probably lots of other things, but I know her as the expert on email marketing. And I thought it would be a benefit to have her kind of come and share with everyone, just some things about, the why, what, how, where, all the things about email marketing.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely.
Hey, Ashley, I have my pen at the ready. I am going to take all sorts of notes today. So help me out.
Absolutely.
Totally, definitely. Okay, so basically, just to kind of start off, and questions are always helpful. I'm here to answer any questions whatsoever, whether it's in the comments here together. I'm super incredibly excited. Basically, for me, email marketing is really about going through the process of simplifying it in order to retain customers, amplify relationships, and honestly, just be a human. I got into email marketing specifically as a web designer originally because I really felt like, oh my gosh, there's so many salesy emails that just feel like Target ads. And I was like, okay, that's not my cup of tea. I'm all about relationships. And so really what I focus on is that relationship aspect within my email marketing. And so essentially to kind of like start the bucket off here, within email marketing, I have a 3A method that I usually share, which specifically focuses on being able to take your email marketing to where you want it to go. And so the 3 A's are audit, align, and automate. So often we do one of them, but we never do the other two, or we do two and we don't do the three. And what ends up happening is we kind of break the wheel when we're going through this process of essentially allowing us to be able to make sure that our email marketing flows throughout our entire business. And so within that, I have the first one, which is audit, which essentially is really just taking a look at where you're at right now. We know the common saying of like, oh my gosh, we don't know where we're at until we won't know, or we don't know how to get there until we know where we're at. And so what I specifically focus on is looking at what you have in terms of what sequences do you have? Where are you looking to actually take your customer? A lot of times, we have these, I was auditing someone's account this morning and she's like, I really want to get people to my course. And I was like, okay, so what do we have in the back end to get people to the course? And we had all of these sequences, but literally not any of them mentioned the course. And I was like, yeah, there we go. That's the disconnect. So really taking a look at the overall picture and just jotting down what you already have and then looking at what is currently working. And so I look at the open and click rates, and I really also make sure for most of my clients, it's 30% open rates, 3% click rates. That's kind of like the average across the board. And so for me, I'm always looking at, okay, so what is this campaign specifically focusing on? But then if I see a campaign that the open rate is really low, I actually look at the campaign before that as well. Because a lot of times, we're like, oh my gosh, no one clicked on this campaign. But then if you have like a 5% open rate, of course, like no one's going to click if you have only 5% of your list opening it.
Sure.
So yeah. Oh, go ahead. Were you going to say something, Maria?
No, I said, yeah. I was agreeing. I was like, yeah, girl, go.
Hey, yeah. Ashley, so engineer over here. We didn't introduce ourselves real quickly, but love statistics, right? So
yeah.
When you do your auditing, do you also do like A to B? Are you looking at that level, or is that farther down in your process?
Yeah, so generally speaking, that's farther down when we get into the process of me actually implementing the things. If the client has already gone through the process of doing A/B testing, I like go fangirl and get the hard eyes. And I'm like, yes, thank you so much. I appreciate you. And I do look at that as well, too, if that's something that they've already ventured into.
Okay.
Yeah. So within that auditing phase, the other thing I look at as well too is while we can go through all of the back end, sometimes some people are like, oh my gosh, I have nothing back there, but they have front end campaigns. So it's really about looking again at the open and click rates, and then also to the size of the audience. So for me, I usually use ConvertKit with my clients, or I just it tells me right on the front screen, the kind of the health of the list. Otherwise, what I'll do is I'll pull a report in the back end and look at the past months worth of campaigns, and then average out the open and click rates to be able to kind of get an idea of the health of the list as a whole. Because a lot of times what ends up happening is we're sending out these campaigns, doing all these things, but we're not monitoring, oh my gosh, okay, what percentage of my audience is cold versus what percentage of my audience is actually warm, opening my emails, engaging, and all the things. So that's the first portion, which is auditing. And then the second portion is going through the process of aligning. So a lot of times, and I've done this myself, where I've set goals for my business, and I've set email goals, and then I've set business goals, and I've kept them completely separate, like two little buckets. And one of the things that I found is that when we go through and actually combine those goals together and start to explore ways that we can actually achieve our business goals through our email marketing. So what I specifically look at is going through and being all right, cool. So if your goal is to get 50 new people into your one-on-one group program, or if you're looking to get 100 course sales, whatever that top layer goal is, we then align your weekly campaigns to then go through that process. So it's not just sending out a bunch of just educational value content, but making sure that that content aligns to where you want that person to go, and making sure that we have a roadmap from step A to step B, and making sure that all goes through the process of aligning. We also do that as well too in the back end, and making sure that we have a clear set customer journey from the moment that somebody opts in all the way through the process of them going through and actually fulfilling the offer. I know I talk a lot about mistakes that I've made, because I feel like I've made all of them, so I can share and be don't make these things, and avoid it, bypass my mistakes. But one of the things that I failed at doing was going through and creating a fulfillment sequence off of my offers. So I would fulfill the offer, I'd send them the course link or the download link, and then they would just hear nothing from me. So actually going through and creating an actual journey where they essentially fulfill the offer, give them that accountability, but then also giving them that next step. So in terms of it being okay, cool, here's this blueprint, but now if you want to take the next step, here's my group coaching, here's the next course, here's the next piece of it. So it's kind of more so you're hand holding somebody through the entire process of getting to know you, what you do, how you can serve them, and then fulfilling on the offer as well too. And then lastly, I have the last piece of this is automating. So I really focus on automating as much as possible. I'm sure you can hear my little dude in the background. He's 2. He takes up so much time in just himself with refilling snack bowls and juice cups that I have to automate stuff within my business. And so I try to go through and automate as much as possible in the back end of my business as well too, scheduling those reminders and the fulfillment, going through and just taking every step of the journey and making sure that somebody feels loved and nurtured, and just again making sure that we hold their hand through that process of making sure that they essentially know that we are here, we have that touch point with them, and then also giving them a ride into the next level as well too. So that is essentially my 3 core pieces of I take people through, and we just go back to the front again. We go back to audit, and it's basically a beautiful flow of auditing again where you're at, aligning to the goal that you're looking to meet, and then automating it so that way you can move on to the next piece.
So how frequently do you, if I'm a small business owner, how frequently should I go through that sequence? Is this quarterly? Do I do it with every product launch? Do I do it every product sequence, blog post? Where does that stand?
Yeah, so it honestly kind of, it depends based off of if it's evergreen, if you're live launching. So if it's an evergreen where you just have this set up, it's automated, it's running in the background, I usually look at it about every 100 people who go through it as a rule of thumb. Or if you're Ashley, I don't have enough time to keep track of when I hit 100 mark, I just take a quick peek at things at least once a month, just to look. I don't go through every single line of content or anything like that. It's really just about looking at, oh my gosh, okay, here's the open rate, here's the click rate. Here is how much like the percentage of people who have actually purchased from this sequence, and just making sure that there's no sudden dips in those open or click rates. For a live launch, I review after the launch is complete. So that way I have notes and ideas and concepts, because that launch is still really fresh in my mind with things that I could improve, feedback that I've received. And then that way, when I go into the next launch, I already have my notes of how I can edit, make things better, all of that really good stuff.
Cool. Thank you.
I'd like to ask something, but I want to take it back a bit, because there are a lot of people that will look at this, not know what email marketing is, maybe just starting out, have no concept or clue of back end, front end, no idea.
Yeah.
These are people that are actually maybe coming onto this for the first time. So if I'm a small business owner, and I want to get into email marketing, but I don't know how, take me through the journey. What's the first step in talking to someone like yourself?
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so the very first thing is we need a home for our people. A lot of times we just are like, oh, I'll just keep them in my G Suite account or on my Gmail or things like that. You have to have a home for them, so that way you can track when people opt in and when people opt out, so that way you're compliant. And so the very first thing is your home. If you're just starting out and you're like, Ashley, I don't know about this whole thing, I just kind of want to experiment, don't want to put any skin in the game, no money down, MailerLite is a really good platform to work with. They have like the automations, capabilities, like all of the things that you would need to be successful to start off with. And then if you're like, you know what, like I'm ready to go all in, I want to do the things, I highly recommend ConvertKit. It's also really easy, very intuitive to use. It's not in terms of with like ActiveCampaign that has like 8,000 options. You won't get lost. And so you need a home first. The second piece of this is obviously we want to attract people into your list. So you want to make some kind of incentive, opt-in, something that's going to drive those people into your list, but also making sure that those people are the right kind of people. A long time ago, when I first started off with email marketing, I made a opt-in, which was like female empowerment quotes. And as great as female empowerment quotes are, I got all the peeps into my email list. And I was like, okay, a lot of these people aren't my ideal client. They really don't need to hear from me. It doesn't make any sense. They're like, oh my gosh, I don't want to learn about web design or email marketing. So you want to make your opt-in very specific to what you do and how you can help people. So when I brainstorm this with my clients, a lot of times it looks like, what is that primary pain point that you can focus on touching? And so you can create a video, you can create a guide, you can create literally however kind of method that you want. That's totally completely fine. I usually recommend based off of your ideal client and how they consume. So like for me, as a busy mom with a 2-year-old, I can't sit down and listen to a 72 or like read a 72-page guide. Like that's probably never going to happen. It's going to sit in my inbox for probably 3 months and I will just not do that. But like a quick 5-step checklist, heck yeah, I could definitely digest that during nap time, or I could easily watch a 15-minute video while I'm making dinner or something like that. So some of the things that I look at in terms of with like effective lead opt-ins are ones that make people go, and this is my language, but like, holy guacamole, like you just read my like diary last night. Like I just texted my friend Angela about this kind of thing. So it's really about like, again, capturing their attention and capturing the right people's attention. And so that's how you'll attract people into your email marketing world. And then after that, it's really about making sure that you have that first initial email set up. You know, I could definitely get into like all the details in terms of with a full welcome sequence and all of that. But if you are just getting started, you want to make sure you have that first welcome email, which is going to basically introduce who you are, what you do, and then obviously gives them the link to the guide, the video, the download that you're going to be receiving with a next step. So this is a really important piece that a lot of people miss. They're just like, hi, my name is Ashley DeLuca. I'm an email marketing strategist. Here's the free guide. And then you're like, okay, cool, I digested the guide, now what? So having a next step in the guide and, or, you know, within the content rather, and in the email is really incredibly important because you can link to your Instagram, you can link to your Facebook group, you can link to your podcast. And that way they have another touch point to go and digest and do something with as well too.
Absolutely. So I have a question too.
Yeah.
So if somebody is just starting out, much like Ray said, and they're trying to figure out what should they put in that welcome email, do you have kind of some guidelines to what that should say? I know you mentioned the name or hi, do you recommend being upfront and super personal? How much information is too much information and how much is too little, I guess is a easy way to say it.
Yeah. No, that's a really great thing. Okay, so within how I would literally write a welcome email. So I have like, hey, first name, or whatever you would say in real life. So like if someone hops on a Zoom call and you're like, hey, Maria, then please write that. Or if you're like, hi, like be very authentic as if you were like speaking directly to them. And that's kind of like how I also write my emails, is based off of like how would I have a conversation if this person was sitting right across from me. So the very first sentence that I state is a sentence that starts with the word you and congratulates them basically on going through the process of taking a step towards that goal. So for me, it's really about like, oh my gosh, and it would say like, hey, Angela, and then it would say, you just took the first step to simplifying your email marketing. And they'd be like, yes, like, it kind of gives them that, like, I see you, I hear you kind of feeling, but also congratulates them on that first step. So then I would say like, yeah, so you just taken the first step. I am seriously so incredibly excited for you to be part of my world. In case you have just like met me or just stumbled across me, my name is Ashley DeLuca. Have in your tagline. And then you can go into, my primary goal is to be able to serve you in XYZ way. I think the biggest thing about that particular statement is you're setting the tone of like, this is the journey that we're planning on going on together. So this also differentiates those who are just like, I'm going to send you all the tips. People don't want all the tips. They want to focus on an after state of like where it is that they want to go. And so you can use that in terms of with like linking it to your program, linking it to something else, using that particular language if you want. And then you would give them the free download and then you would do like a PS next step. So it's not super long. It's not going into your full backstory of like, I have 2 dogs. I live in Southern Ohio kind of thing, but it gives them enough that they can kind of sink their teeth in and be like, oh, she really likes avocados. That's super cool. But they don't yet know that like my son's name is Nick. So I don't know if that like answers your question. Just give them enough that they know who you are, what you do. You can always include a little bit. Like some people like to include like 3 fun facts. Those are really great connection points. But just think about it like as if you were going on a Zoom call with somebody and introducing yourself. Like what would you say? How would you say it? And put that into an email context.
Absolutely. All right. So, I guess I'll ask another question because everybody else is just like silent. They're still, I guess, trying to absorb.
I'm still processing all the information.
I'm seeing everybody nodding and taking notes. So that's always a good thing. Because I know it's one of those things, even if you're in the world of marketing, and I get people that say this all the time, well, you're in marketing. Okay. Marketing is so broad.
Yeah.
If you're not in that specific thing, like email marketing is it's a whole other animal. And even though I'm in the world of marketing, I may be able to tell you like high level of some of the things you should do. It definitely in no way says all the things that you should do. And that was one of the reasons I really wanted to have you on, because so many people that I talk to are like, well, I have all of my people on Facebook groups. And here's the problem. If you're literally building kind of your house on somebody else's land, which is what you're doing if you're just really relying on like a Facebook group, which are great, don't get me wrong, but at any point in time, Facebook could be like, you're done. And if you do not have, your list somewhere else, you start all over. And sadly, I know people that's happened to on Instagram specifically, like all of a sudden they just woke up, couldn't get in their account, and thousands and thousands of followers just gone. No email list to fall back on, no nothing. So, I think that for any entrepreneur or small business or whatever size business, I don't think it could be stated enough how important really having that email list is. And that was one of the reasons I wanted to have you on that. And I think you have just a super fun personality, which I really gravitate towards. So I was like, I love her, even though I wasn't really sure how to say your last name, but I was saying it in my mind and I did find out I was right. So I want to go ahead and note that. But no, I mean, do you run into people a lot that they question, why do I need email marketing? Is that something that you find is fairly common, especially with this social media age?
Yeah, totally. Definitely. I think the biggest thing is that going back, like you're renting like property on somebody else's land. And I've seen it as well too. I've seen 2 people in the past week be like, I've lost all of my Instagram followers. Like, what the heck, man?
Yep.
Or like I tried to get into Clubhouse and Clubhouse was down, so I sent an email out to my list with the tips I was going to share. And so the biggest thing is that a lot of times we get into this focus of like, oh my gosh, the numbers, right? And because like people can go to your Instagram page and see you have 10,000 followers, but they can't go to your email, like log into your email marketing account and see you have 10,000 email subscribers. And I think we put such a huge emphasis on those followers that a lot of times we lose track of like, I want, like for me in my business, like I want authentic relationships where people like see my name in their inbox and they're like, oh my gosh, that girl loves avocados and emails. Like that's the kind of feeling that I want to have. I want to have a personal relationship and making sure that like you want me here and I want you here, not because you're following me because you think that like you have to follow me kind of thing. And so I think it makes a huge difference when we shift that perspective. But also too, it's just being smart within your business. I mean, there's so much more that you can do within an email list as well to make sure that you are specifically touching people where you want to, as opposed to just sending out a Instagram story and it goes out to everybody. You can specifically just send out like a launch campaign to people who raised their hand and said, yes, I want this launch campaign. So the personalization is so much more deeper and also a lot more effective within email as opposed to social media too.
I'm so glad you said that, because here's my next question for you. There's a lot of noise out there between Clubhouse, Instagram, Facebook. How do you separate your business from the competition? You alluded to personalization. You go a little deeper than that in dealing with your customer base.
Yeah. So honestly, the biggest thing for me, and this is something that I've had to discover in a world of people who are like, I write emails, like I know how to do the things. I absolutely dive into the personal brand side of things, of really making, whether if you're the front face of the business or if on the flip side, you know, making your business come alive in a very much so deeper level or way, just like, you know, like with humans, we're so complex and we have all these amazing things about us. So like for me, I mentioned like, oh, I love avocados and I love sea turtles and I love coffee, like all of these things. Those are like really high level connection points that I can connect with other people using. And so within my business, that's what I focus on, but it could also be on the flip side as well too, where, you know, in a, like a bigger brand sense, I've seen one company who had a animal that they had associated with their brand. And so that animal within association with their brand had all these different characteristics that then connected with people. So I don't know if that like answers your question, or it could dive into like a whole other discussion on that. Yeah.
No, because that's important. I mean, if you don't separate yourself from the competition and you're only based on price, you lose. So
100%.
Right. So, you know, you have to do that through email marketing. No, thank you.
Yeah, totally. I remember when I was starting off with web design, and I was struggling within being in all of the web design sea, and I ended up talking a lot about my dogs at the time. And I remember one girl, she specifically told me that she hired me because I had such a huge love for dogs, and she did too. And so I think there's a fine balance of, you know, obviously like sharing yourself as a person and sharing, you know, what it is that's going on in your world and like those connection points. But then also on the flip side, you know, sharing those so that way those are relationship and trigger factors, where like, for an example, I had someone the other day send me a toy for my son, and it was like an avocado toy. And they were like, oh my gosh, I know you love avocados and have a 2-year-old. So I thought this would be perfect for your kid. And I was like, oh, thanks. I'll buy that. Thanks.
Absolutely.
So I don't mean to dominate the conversation, folks, but I got one more question I'd like to ask while I'm on a roll. So now let's take it back to high level. Okay, we went from high level back to low level to where, you know, someone has an entry point. Let's take it back to high level. How would you tell someone with their website and their social media? Now we're creating the entire package. How does email marketing now fit into that? And what would you tell someone that's saying is not starting a business, has a business, wants to get into email marketing further, but is not sure where to go?
Okay, cool. So the biggest thing is that email marketing is part of your ecosystem within your website and your social media. So it doesn't take away from it. It adds to the experience, where again, it's that additional touch point. So the way that I would look at it in terms of with a higher level is, especially if you already have a business, you might even have an email marketing account set up. the very first thing that I would do is take a look at what email addresses that you already have. So whether they're email addresses that you've received consent from Square, or maybe you have, you know, WooCommerce purchases that they're like, oh yeah, I send up for marketing emails, and you just like never sent them. I would collect everything that you have, like collect all your data, put it into one place into the platform. And then from there, I would actually send out an email that would be like, hey, I dropped the ball. I said I was going to send you marketing emails, or I was going to send you these helpful tips and tricks, and I like totally did it. I'm like, so sorry about that. So I would just like, again, reintroduce yourself as you did in the welcome email, and basically just set the tone. And so that way you can start afresh. So that way you can start sending out weekly emails and like letting them know, hey, I'm going to be sending you weekly emails. Like I pinky promise, like this is totally going to happen this time. And then that way, if they're interested, they can stay. Otherwise they can go. And then from that point, it's really about making sure that like you connect in and giving those call to action. So like it from your like your social media, giving call to actions to join your list, using your opt-in, like making that a once a week thing within your social postings, or making sure you add in an opt-in box on your website and pulling into that way. And then also within your emails, you can then have call to actions to go back to your Facebook page and check out a particular live that you did, or an Instagram reel that you just created for fun. And so those are kind of ways that you can then look at it, kind of like a web where like email, I like to look at it as kind of at the center, and then your social and your website are all kind of like links off of that in order to then connect together like a huge circle, essentially.
Awesome.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Ashley, is part of your service to actually manage this for companies, or do you help them set up? And if somebody were to just get help setting it up, what kind of personnel, how many people do they need to manage this and take care of it and execute on it and analyze it?
Yeah, totally. Great question. Okay, so basically, I do all of the things. So I go as, you know, like just doing the strategy of like, here's your game plan, here's what you need to do. I do the copy and the implementation. So like, I do all the things in terms of with like getting it set up. One of my biggest philosophies is like, I just like to go through and just like basically patch holes. So if you already have something and you're just like, I don't know what's going on, we need to fix this, I'll go through and just patch holes, and I don't like rewrite the whole entire wheel if like we already have pieces. And then the last piece of it is like the implementation and the management side, which I do. But then also too, if you're like, okay, cool, like I actually want to just have like my own team member do that. Usually for most people, it's just a simple VA in order to be able to implement the emails or just look at it, fill out the spreadsheet that I provide and things like that. It's very simple. So usually it's just looking for someone who's familiar with the platform in terms of with like, okay, if you use ConvertKit, I would like make a job opportunity for a ConvertKit VA or someone familiar with ConvertKit who can plug in the emails for you and then take that strategy and basically continue it.
So I have another question. How often do you recommend people send emails? Like, do you do like weekly, bi-weekly, monthly? Does it really depend on the industry?
Yeah. So the biggest thing is that it's really about you picking something and being consistent with it. And so a lot of times, you know, people be like, I'm going to send out a daily email, and then they send out 3 days and then they like drop off the face of the earth. So I would rather you go through the process of sending a monthly email. If that's what you can manage, if that's what you have content for, you can put all your heart and soul into it, as opposed to sending out really terrible daily emails. Most of my clients, it depends on list size and kind of like what our goals are, but usually we either send weekly emails or we send 2 emails a week. Again, depending on the goal of the audience, what we're trying to do. One company that I work for, they have lots of events that they do. So we have to send out 2 emails a week in order to be able to keep up with the amount of events that they have going on. But then my other clients, we just send out weekly emails because they have like an ongoing service that they're like providing or doing. So yeah, basically it really just depends on what you can give it all into, and then also too making sure that like you're touching people the way that you want to touch them, essentially. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. So do you recommend, I know you mentioned ConvertKit, and I'm not that familiar with ConvertKit, but do you recommend using a CRM, or does ConvertKit kind of have its own CRM built in? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, so ConvertKit doesn't necessarily advertise that it's like an actual legitimate CRM. I set it up in a way that it does serve as a CRM for me. I personally use Dubsado in terms of with kind of like the very detailed of like I have contract, I have invoices, like all of that really good stuff. But I do have buckets essentially of people within my ConvertKit, so I can look at, okay, these are people who have, you know, raised their hand, have scheduled a lead call with me, versus people who have actually become clients. So that way my emails are very targeted, and I'm not sending current clients emails about working with me when they already actually do.
Yeah. They'd be like, Ashley, you don't know me, girl.
Right. Like, what happened? What happened? Or they'll get an email from me advertising my services, and then right underneath is an email about me asking a question about something about the services I'm providing. So like, I like to do buckets in terms of with being able, again, keeping it super simple, in terms of with like, these are the people who have raised their hand, said that they were interested in working with me. These are the people who have, and then the rest of it is basically people who I'm like trying to fit into one of those two buckets.
Awesome. I think it's very good info for people to kind of realize, because I know a lot of people get very overwhelmed with just the idea of email marketing, because there's just so many things. And like Ray mentioned earlier, it's so noisy. There's just all the things. And, you know, I think even as professionals, you can get super overwhelmed by all the things you're expected to do. And I always kind of use the example that, you know, social media should kind of be like the handshake, like, hey, my name is so-and-so, and this is what I am and who I am. But really your email list is really where it's at. And I love that you're kind of explaining a lot of these things, because again, even the well-meaning professionals, and I'm one of these, because we've actually had a conversation off of this conversation about how I'm not doing my email list the way that I know I should be. So, I mean, it's kind of one of those things that even when you know what you should be doing, you're not always good at getting it done. So I think it's super important to give people just some bite-sized pieces on how to start to do all the things, right? Do the things for email marketing. So back to that though, if somebody is like me, and you know, they're on social media, maybe they've sent out a few emails, not consistently, like you said, like I'll be like weekly, and then I'm like monthly, and then I'm like every other day, and then it's all over the place. But you know, if they're trying to get more on a schedule, and they're like, okay, well, I'm going to do a, you know, weekly email. Do you recommend that you try to keep it more evergreen? Do you recommend that you try to stay kind of on trend with what you're putting on social media? Like, is there like a rule to that, or is it just kind of like whatever?
I wouldn't say there's necessarily a rule. I've done it both ways, where I've created unique content just for email, and then, you know, like they have whatever going on social. Sometimes it's like, okay, we want to keep everything aligned. And so sometimes it's also based off of what you have on the social calendar and putting it into email. A lot of times we get scared because we're like, oh my gosh, we posted this on Instagram yesterday, and then we're going to send this email today. Not everybody's going to see that Instagram post. Like, that's just how the algorithm works these days. And so there really isn't, again, necessarily a rule for that. It's just more so about like what feels best for you in terms of with how you want to do that. For me, I view my email list as a lot more personal in terms of with things, as opposed to just kind of like blasting it all over on social media. Like, I view it very personal. And I try to treat it that way as well too.
Ashley, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
So they put together the mailing list. It goes out, let's just say thousands or more people, and there's a typo in the subject line. What's your recommendation?
Death by subtraction.
No, I think sometimes typo, the potential for a typo goes up the more people see it, because everyone becomes so blind to it. But it happens. And where I worked, I mean, we've sent it to millions of people, and it had a typo. So what's the Ashley DeLuca game plan for that?
Okay, so here's my game plan. So I like to be fun and funny and just literally be lighthearted about everything as much as possible, because I have to be very serious with my toddler when he's making fun of me. And so when it comes to typos, specifically like a subject line typo, you know, the biggest thing is that like the rest of the content is fine. Like, if it's just a subject line, I would probably honestly just let it go and be like, whoops, okay, no, it's totally fine. If it's something within the content that's like really incredibly important, like a broken link or a missing link, I try to make it literally as funny as possible and send out an additional email and be like, oh my gosh, my toddler literally just tried to pour the entire dog bowl over his head. I hit send and totally forgot to grab the link. I am seriously so sorry. Here's the link if you have any questions about that. And so you just make it really personal and just be like super human about it. And I think especially when it comes to typos, when it's not necessarily like super incredibly important. So like, let's say it's like the word the and you switch the T and the H. Things like that, I don't take it seriously where I feel like I need to send out a whole email and be like, oh my gosh, guys, I literally just sent out an email and the was spelled wrong. If it's somebody's name, I always like to make sure that like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. It's actually this person's name. Like, here's some love for that person, that kind of thing. I think it's really just about being funny about it and just being very lighthearted and being human. And honestly, a lot of times people don't even notice and they're like, oh, I didn't even notice you did that wrong. And I'm like, cool, that's great. But I did. So I needed to say something.
Jeff, you could probably figure out how to be funny, right?
I maybe.
His website, jeffisfunny.com. So he's a comedian. So that's why.
Oh, yeah. You could totally nail that then. You're probably like, oh, that dog bowl thing was lame, but I totally know how I can make this funnier. So, yeah, 100%.
Well, it was always interesting because it was always a big conversation. Do you risk losing subscribers by actually acknowledging the typo versus just letting it go? I understand it depends on, what the actual typo is, but
yeah,
and probably who your people are.
Right.
Totally. Definitely. I mean, for me, especially like I usually target, I attract a lot of other moms and dads. So a lot of times they're like, hey, it's totally fine. I've totally done that as well too. But I have worked with clients who have a very serious audience, like very, very way more serious than I am, obviously. And so a lot of times I will go back, acknowledge the correction, and make sure that like everything's good to go. But yeah, I agree. It definitely really depends on your audience as well. And sometimes as well too, it maybe they don't really even need to be there. Maybe, unsubscribes I'm always welcome to because I know that like they don't want to be part of my avocado world. That's totally completely fine. All the rest of us can definitely like geek over avocados and guacamole and all of that. So.
I love avocados, so I'm good with that. So you mentioned the subject line, like, and I am not the email marketing expert here, but I have played around with just different subject lines, even with the same body. Like, how important do you think subject lines?
Yeah,
beta testing stuff out just to see open rates and stuff.
Totally. Yeah. So within subject lines, they're 50% the actual thing that you type within the subject line and 50% the relationship that you have with that subscriber, because it comes up as Ashley DeLuca and then subject line, and they're going to see one of those two things. So for me, it's really about the first portion of this is like the relationship that you have with your subscriber. As I had mentioned earlier, like when people open my emails, I want them to feel like all the love and the energy and the funniness and all of the things. And so I really focus on having that relationship within email marketing, within social, like every touch point that I have with like a lead or a client or anybody for that matter, like I want them to know like those particular things about me and have those like feelings, right? And so I just make sure it's like all across the board like that within my copy and all the things. But then also too, within subject lines, I find that ones that are short work so much better than the long ones. A lot of times, and I've sent out so many emails, I've lost count at this point, where like the subject line will be like, like this whole sentence. And a lot of times it gets cut off, especially on phones. Like they don't even see the full sentence. And so it doesn't even make sense half the time. So I really focus on really short and sweet subject lines. My most topped one that I have ever sent out was literally just, hey. That is it. Hey. Because it's personal. It's like very much so like, hey, what do you want? Like, what's going on here? So I really focus on I never mean being deceptive by any sort of imagination, but as short as possible, making sure that like it captures their attention. 2 tools that I'll recommend as well if you're just like, I don't even know what to write in the box, so please help. Like, I don't even know how you would even come up with something like that. I use subjectline.com. It'll give you a grade on your subject line. It doesn't necessarily give you like additional suggestions, so you have to type something into it. But it's free. You just got to put like your email address in, and then you can use the tool for like life, basically. And then the other one I use is CoSchedule's Headline Analyzer. This one is for like you wordy nerds who are like me, who kind of want to understand the feeling behind the subject line, understanding more on depth of not just like grading it based off of how it'll show, but then also to understanding how that other person will read it. So I like that one as well too.
Awesome. Yeah, I think those tools, I've not used the co-scheduler before, but I have used subject line before. I like playing around with them. I will break them up into several things just to see what works. And some of them I'll use like completely out there subject lines just to see how many people open. Those have actually been my highest open rates, but I also have the personality I have too. And much like you said, a lot of that is very much relationships. So they're probably like, what the heck is she doing now? Type of thing.
Exactly. Yes.
So, okay, let's kind of dial back for a second. If I'm the entrepreneur or small business owner and I'm like, okay, I don't have an email list. How do I get an email list? Just bite-sized kind of pieces on how to do that. And then my next step to get that into a scheduler to start sending out emails, just super like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever steps.
Yeah. Okay. So obviously it goes back to the lead magnet. So get your lead magnets together. That's going to be super incredibly important. Again, whatever medium, if you want to make it in Canva, if you just want to do a really quick Loom video, anything works, literally. However your audience is going to digest that. The second piece is going to be logging into your email marketing platform. The majority of them, especially if you use like MailerLite or ConvertKit, they actually have a landing page feature in there, which is super incredibly easy. Instead of going to your website and figuring out how to code it and make it pretty and all the things, you can just literally use a template and then just customize like the picture and the text and all of the things. And it will literally, especially with ConvertKits, it'll walk you through exactly how to set it up in terms of with like, all right, change the text, do this. All right, then your actions. So that way you know that like, okay, cool. When someone signs like log or puts their information into the form, I know that they're going to then get the email because I've linked it up that way. So essentially, set up your landing page. Just set up the like settings that are already like inside of that program for you, and just double checking and making sure like, oh, okay, cool, like all of these things set up properly, which is really just making sure that they get added to the right list. That's like usually the biggest thing, is making sure that when they hit submit, it has a little thank you message and lets them know like, hey, hop on over to your inbox. It'll be in there in like 5 minutes. That's what I do. Just make it really simple. It doesn't even have to be super crazy. And then making sure that from there you have it so that way there's an automation set up with that welcome email with the link. So I talked about the welcome email previously here. And so what I would do is I would go to the automation, and at the top of the automation, I would say, I would select the form that they filled out, which would be like the same landing page or form that you have in the front end that you just made. And then you would link it to the email, and you would have it like send out this email, and then you would customize that email to then have, your information. One of the things I didn't mention before is making sure that your emails are as plain as possible. A lot of times we like to go into like super frilly and like add all these things and images and all that. And it definitely does hurt your deliverability. There's a huge conversation we can have about like high level deliverability and like, do this, don't do that, make sure you check that and all that. But especially if you're just getting started, just keep it as simple as possible. If you want to add your logo up at the top. Use your brand fonts if you would like, your colors. That's totally cool. And then just making sure that you just, again, make it as plain as possible. So that way when they're looking at it on a phone, especially since most people are checking their email by phone these days, making sure that it like appears the best and they don't have any problems reading the things.
So Ashley, I've got my email. I've got my people. I'm ready to go. How do I create a compelling message for somebody to buy?
Okay, so within that, I go back to kind of the planning stage of like, all right, what is this month's game plan? So I start off at the top first in terms of with what is the goal. So like, let's say for an example, you want to sell 10 people to your course. Simple, right? Like 10 people to your course. So then what I would do is I would literally write out like, if you're going to send them on Monday, I mean, usually most of my clients were on Monday or Tuesdays these days, but like, so I would go like Monday and then the date and then do it for like the next 4 dates. And then underneath of that, I would put the goal for that. So the biggest thing is that we don't want to just send out 4 sales campaigns, right? Like we want to lead into the sale. So that way it's not just like buy my stuff, buy my stuff, buy my stuff. So I'll actually first start off with a thought or a pain point that they currently have. So this can look like in terms of I'm trying to think of like a really easy one. So let's say your course is teaching people how to lose their next 5 pounds. What I would do is I would look at it and I would do like my first email, not necessarily about like, here's 5 tips to lose your next 5 pounds, but I would talk more so about a thought that they had in terms of with like, it's not really that they want to lose those 5 pounds. They want to look good in their skinny jeans, or they want to look good in that little black dress, or they want to feel like they can take their shirt off at the beach, that kind of feeling, right? So you could write to that using a story, whether it's yourself, whether it's somebody else, where they feel like, oh my gosh, this person gets it. Because you're explaining to them literally an experience that they're wanting to have. So I would first start off with like a thought, walk them through that process through a story and in terms of with having that thought. So I guess I'll go into an example because sometimes that can get really confusing. I would literally go through the process. For me specifically, I would say, let's say it's another Monday morning and you're going into your closet and you're finding that, you're trying to figure out what pairs of jeans has a little bit of extra slack because you ate an extra sundae last night while you were celebrating your daughter's birthday or something like that, right? And you could go into that frustration of like trying to find your pair of jeans and then none of them fitting or not fitting the way you want them to. And then so you could go into that story in terms of with that pain point and then bring it back on around. Because a lot of times we'll just like end with that of like, oh, I feel so frustrated. And they're like, okay, that wasn't helpful. What do you mean? Like, we went through this whole story and you made me depressed. Like, what the heck? So then what I do is I link it back around to be like, man, it would feel awesome to be able to just pull any pair of jeans out of your closet and feel super like confident in them, right? And so, this is something that I, dive in deeper within, and you could link to your offer within that. That's how I like to sell. I like to sell with stories. It's like the easiest way for me to sell. But you could also even just link to a blog post or a podcast and be like, hey, I just have like my, I just dropped this new podcast episode on, my 5 favorite pairs of skinny jeans, or like whatever it is going to help, right? Like this is very much so off the cuff. But essentially what you can do is you can then link to another resource. And so that email could just be that entirely about telling a story that then links into a resource that they would find helpful within that point of where they're at. And then you could also link into the same thing within like your sales. So I would do 3 emails that are value-based. It could be stories. It could be, again, your stories, your client stories. It could be like stories that like totally make sense, which Jeff, I know, will have no problem telling stories about all the things. And so what you could do is you could do the stories. And then within your sales email, I actually do it very similar. So I use the same exact method in terms of with pulling out a pain point through a story, and really just focusing on painting that picture of where they're at right now and where it is that they want to go. I've seen people who will write just based off of where people want to go, but it doesn't give them a clear roadmap in terms of with understanding where they're at, because people want to feel seen and heard right where they're at today. Whether it's, oh my gosh, I have this business that I want to scale to 6 figures. And right now I'm like sitting in 5-figure land. Like they need someone to come to their level and be like, hey, I know you're at 5 figures, but like, let's take you over to 6 figures. And like, here's how we're going to do this. It's through my course, all of that really good stuff. So that's how I plan in my head, in terms of with like kind of planning that roadmap and just being very intentional about what I'm talking about and making sure it speaks directly to that person on the other side who is interested in my offer, service, product, whatever it may be.
Absolutely. And yeah, you hit the nail on the head with that one. Story driven, emotional driven marketing is a winner every single time. I love that. Yeah. I do want you to touch for a second. And if well, I'm assuming, if not, you could tell me where to find the resources on the legalities surrounding email lists. I know that there are legalities. I can't quote them. Maybe you can't quote them, but maybe where people can find them. Just want to mention that because I don't want people going, oh, I'm going to go build this list and I'm going to go get email addresses from all the places. And, there's definitely legality surrounding that I want to make sure and bring up.
Yeah, totally. Okay. So I should preface, I am not a lawyer. Please don't quote me based off of this. This is just like general information that you could literally find Googling. So basically there's 2 things that I keep an eye out. And there's like the CAN-SPAM Act. And then there's also the GDPR thing. GDPR thing was like a huge thing that blew up and everyone was like, oh my gosh, I need to figure this all out. It's really simple. So within ConvertKit, and this is something that is very easy and makes my life so much easier within email marketing, which is why I love them. They have an option down below in the settings where you can you'll send the GDPR required emails to those who need it. So it's based off of IP. Because like I live in Ohio and like I don't need a GDPR email consent while other people in Europe do. And so for people who don't have that option to send based off of IP, like if they're in like MailerLite or something like that, I would highly recommend having the GDPR settings on, because you don't want to come across somebody who doesn't have that setting. And then you're just like, what the heck, man? Like what? Like, yeah. So GDPR is something you need to take a look at. And then the CAN Spam Act as well too, which essentially is just don't take people's email addresses and just throw them into your system. Like they need to opt in. So that's why I had mentioned earlier about having a place for your people, having a home for them, because what ends up happening is like if you don't have those records and someone comes after you about it, you need to have like something there to be like, oh, this person opted in with this IP address, and like the email marketing program essentially tracks that. I'm actually doing a podcast episode with a lawyer all about this, because she could definitely explain it way more better than I can. But those are like two things that I would definitely look at.
That's great. I mean, the high level overview is perfect. That's what we wanted. I know I've read little things. I didn't remember the acronyms, but you remember them, so that's great. I just know that I have to make sure and click the little things on my email marketing. So so I just wanted to make sure I mentioned that, because I don't want people tuning in partially through this episode and be like, that's it, I am building my email list, it is happening, and then they don't realize that there is legality surrounding if you're allowed to send them an email or not. So I wanted to make sure I mentioned that. So I think that's great. Ray, Angela, Jeff, do you all have any more questions?
No, it's great stuff.
Yeah.
So
a lot of great
Ashley,
tools today.
Yeah, super helpful. But what if your primary content delivery is a blog? Are emails with just links to the blogs okay? How does that kind of, do you do the little, it seems like back in the day, MailChimp had this like auto read more version or something. I'm not using MailChimp, but what, is that even a thing anymore? How does that work? Or what's your experience with that?
Yeah, totally. So that is still a thing. I have set it up for those who are like gung-ho on like, I want this particular thing. The way I like to do it is, and the thing is that if you have a YouTube channel, you have a podcast, you have some place that you are regularly sending out content or posting content, what I would do is I would actually create a short little blurb email with like a short little intro in terms of with like, oh my gosh, I had to make sure I sent this on over to you. This is like my latest blog post and this is what it's about. And then I would take in the takeaways. So often people are just like, here's the first 3 lines of the blog post. Well, I want to know what this blog post is going to do for me. Why should I take the next 5 minutes to go read this blog post? So if you create a little takeaway section, and it could just be like 1, 2, 3, or, even if it's just one primary takeaway, like I'm going to show you how to make this superb new sourdough bread. Like that's totally completely fine, but just paint that picture for them. Some people will go through and actually include the blog post into that. For me personally, I love short emails, like love short to the point. And it also gives me a better way to be able to track what content people are interested in, what people are interested in, like learning more about and tagging them and all of that. So I prefer to do the takeaway version where it's just a short little blurb, takeaway, and then like a button or a link to then go over to the blog post.
I like that. Mick Manhattan says, hey, everyone. He's got a great podcast called The Scene Snobs. So, and you need to be email marketing, Mick. If you're not, you need to talk to Ashley, get some emails going out, have them check out, more of your stuff. So if somebody's wanting to find out more about, what you have to offer and, all the things, Ashley, avocados included, where's the best place for them to kind of follow you?
Yeah, totally. So basically my home base is ashleykedaluca.com. I also have a Facebook group and podcast that are called Email Marketing Simplified, where I dive in more into email marketing. You can learn more about my love for avocados and emails and sea turtles and all the things. But yeah, those are basically my kind of 3 places. But if you need to find all of the things, just hop on over to my website and you'll find all of it.
Awesome. Do you all have anything else for Ashley?
No,
I
great
feel
stuff.
like she,
Good.
like seriously, you got all of it. Yeah, all
Yeah.
of it. I'm like, wow.
Right?
So yeah,
Completely.
great stuff.
Thank you.
Great
Thank
stuff.
you for sharing all your expertise.
Yes, thank you so
Absolutely.
much for having me.
Yeah, it's been great. It's been great.
Yeah.
So I don't think we've ever finished this early. So I'm at a loss. I'm like, do we just end and
Maria,
end
we
on a
didn't
high
introduce
note?
all. We should introduce all ourselves.
So do we tap dance? Yeah, we
Yeah.
can. So go
Yeah.
ahead. So you introduce yourself, Angela.
Okay. I'm Angela Buckley, and I'm with Creatively Efficient, and I author a leadership series called Strength in Nature. So I just really enjoy working with people coming out of their shell and just doing all the things, right? Like overcoming that fear and moving forward. So thanks for sharing with us today.
Jeff, you're
Jeff
it.
Yeah. Oh, hey. Jeff Dwoskin, comedian, podcaster, founder of #Stampede. We're engagement experts on the social media platforms that help drive people from social to other platforms. So,
And Ray.
Oh, me? Oh, I'm just here. No, I'm only kidding. I'm Ray Baxter. I am a brand and customer service strategist. You can catch me on my website, coachrayspeaks.com. Podcast by the same name. I'm gonna kill my editor because he hasn't been able to let me launch my podcast series, my new series yet. But that should be out within the next 2 to 3 weeks with our brand new channel, Impactful Solutions Academy. So look out for that.
Ooh.
nice.
Awesome. Yeah, that's exciting. So, and I'm Maria Daniels, Reset Business Consulting, and then host of Successfully Chaotic. So, and Ashley, I've super enjoyed having you on. And I know it's hard when you got the little one running around. I've been there. Like, I'm lucky. My kids are at the babysitter right now, or I would have the same thing going on, except my kids actually beat each other up and bring blood. So it's to that level now. But it's like an MMA fight whenever my kids are in the room. But yeah, I mean, it's been super great having you on, and I will make sure and enter in your website and stuff in the chat when we end here. But it's been great. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Yes,
Ashley.
thank you.
And I guess we'll just end. So let's wave because I still don't have a video. So all right.